So we recording now? Okay. It's 12:31 and we'll try to go ahead and get cranking. So it's that time of year again. It's plant sale time. So I know I'm going to be sleep deprived for the next 2 weeks. We're really excited about what's coming up. We've already started the Tuesday gardening series. Doing eco dyes that what came out of it was absolutely amazing. Definitely something we want to redo. So with that being said, it was interesting, I think, learning not to do our first class the day after Labor Day. You know, I'm constantly learning. Let's see, how do we get the PowerPoint up? I'm thankful to have Joey because I just would be banging a keyboard. Yeah. All right. Let's rock and roll. We got so I did want to go ahead and draw everyone's attention before we really get into the plants. Next week for our Tuesday gardening series, we've got the leaf casting workshop again. This has always been popular. We do still have some spots available for this one. So this is where, you know, we'll go out in the garden, get you know, typically everyone likes to go get a big elephant ear leaf, but you do a concrete mold of it. And we have one on the 20th, and then we have another one about a month later. But I wanted to draw everyone's attention to that. And then the week after that, we'll be doing got someone talking about raising monarchs at home. It's funny because someone from the house was just asking me about this. And, you know, I said, well, I don't know, but that's why we have someone coming in. If you're interested in just looking at the calendar of what's coming up, we do have the print calendars in the back. You can always also go to renolda.org/visit/calendar and look everything up, and that'll have the links to sign up for the classes. You know, we're excited about, you know, it's the start of another season. It's kind of the whole cycle starting over again. With that being said, helps to turn it on. Obviously, we're here to talk about plants. Before I dive into the plants, I just want to go over a few things that, you know, always seem to stand out of the questions that come up with doing this and how we've started doing it online. One of the big things that we did, you know, right when I got here, we used to do the plant sale for friends the day before. Then, of course, COVID hit and we've, you know, pretty much erased everything, had to figure out things different. So now what we do as a benefit of being a friend of the gardens is you'll get an order form where you can go ahead and say, I know I want this plant. I want to go ahead and pre-order it, book it for myself. That order form will be emailed out probably around 2 o'clock this afternoon. So if you don't get it, you know, I'll highlight this in a second, but reach out to us. But in terms of getting, that pre-order form will go out sometime around 2 this afternoon. We do ask that just, you know, keeping things simple when we're trying to process all the orders during the actual in-person plant sale. We ask that they get prepaid. So the order will come in, I go through it, we make sure, yes, we've got everything. Here's the total, here's the link. Just, you know, we try to make it as seamless as possible. And then we can have pickup. You can come pick up your plants on Friday from 10 to 5, or you can just come during Saturday. Your plants will be set off to the side. You can pick them up on Saturday. One thing that we did, you know, always trying to improve is this time, if you come pick up your plants on Friday, you can also, you know, go wander about and see if there's other things and we hope that you'll want to add more to it. This is a big revenue generator for the garden, so it helps us keep doing the great things that we've been doing. Another thing is, you know, if you aren't a friend, we won't call you out, but shame on you. You can easily go become a friend online. We also have friends brochures in the back. You just go onto the website, renolda.org, go to support and then membership. But we do have to cut it off because of the processing. If you sign up online, we cut it off on Sunday because we'll get the reports on Monday and we're going to stop taking the pre-orders on Wednesday because we've got to have enough time to, do all the other logistics. Now, when the email link goes out, if at 3 o'clock you're going, I didn't get my link, first thing to do, go check your spam box. Some of these things, they get kicked to your spam. Also look for, the email should come from Renolda Gardens. I think we've tweaked that. Sometimes it came from just Renolda. So we're trying to clarify, you try to tweak everything, get better every year. If after checking, looking for something from Renolda Gardens or that subject line of pre-order and it's not in your spam box, reach out to us. And it's just easy. It's john@renolda.org or sarah@renolda.org. We'll check to make sure that in case you lapse for some reason, but it should be pretty current. All that being said, this is, it's time for plants. I'm really excited about our plant selection for the fall. We actually have brought more trees into the mix. There's a great tree liner nursery out on the West Coast, and they do some great, fantastic selections, but they also do some great natives for our area. So that being said, let's jump right into things, and I'll just highlight things. If you have questions, go ahead and, raise them. I'll reiterate it for those online. So one of the plants that we've got in the plant sale is yellowwood. This is a fantastic native tree, and I've seen some mature specimens of this, like on Swarthmore's campus. There's a couple on campus here. It's related to wisteria. So when it blooms in spring, they're white chains of flowers that look like wisteria. They can take a few years from a seedling to get to blooming size. It gets great yellow fall color. It's called yellowwood because if a branch breaks, the interior wood is yellow. But it's an absolutely stunning plant. If any of y'all did the garden tours this spring with the Garden Club Council, Harriet McCarthy had the minute I pulled up, I was like, oh, I like her already, because she had one blooming in the front yard. It's just a great native tree, stunning flowers, and it's actually not the easiest thing to find in the wild. There you can see what the fall color look like. And like I said, and it's almost like, you talk about oaks, it has a mass year of fruit. Yellowwood can kind of do a huge bloom one year and then sparse the next. So it's not a thing of it not being healthy or not, but we've got that available. I love anything, if you're familiar with Styrax, or usually it's Japanese snowbell is what's usually out there. That whole plant family, I love. I haven't seen anything in that family I don't like. This is one of our natives, mountain silverbell. It gets pretty sizable white flowers, bell-shaped in the spring. They definitely don't show up in landscapes as much as they should because, bald and burlap ones, it's almost a kiss of death. They've got to be in a container. They've got really kind of fibrous roots that they don't handle being transplanted that well. So getting one in a container is great. It does like acidic soils, which pretty much is typical for what we've got, except for, of course, our gardens here, which are neutral. We have to be different no matter what. But gets good fall color, wonderful white blooms in the spring. Another thing, I love our native magnolias, and especially the big leaf ones. Now, Magnolia Microphola, big leaf magnolia, it's the largest simple leaf in North America. So, and they can get huge. It's a little messy when it drops its leaves, in fall. It's a little different looking, but in terms of like texture in the garden, they almost look tropical. And when it flowers, literally, dinner plate size flowers, they're huge. And the undersides of the leaves are silver. It's such a cool plant. And, when I was putting this together, I kept going back to Durr because I kept, Dr. Durr, of course, is regarded as, he wrote the Bible. He doesn't like the texture. And if Durr doesn't like the plant, he's going to bash it in the book. And he kind of said, this isn't a great plant for landscapes. I love seeing it in a garden. It just stands out and the flowers just wow you. So we've got that. We also have Magnolia tripetala, and this honestly was the plant that I immediately knew when we were looking for houses, and I got out of the car, I stepped out of the car, saw one of these in the woods and said, this is the property. It's our native big leaf magnolia that's right in this region. Typically you'll see it if you go out in the woods and there's kind of a little bit of a ravine that dips down towards a creek, that's where it really loves to grow. But the flowers will tend to be clustered at the tips of the branches. So that's why they call it umbrella magnolia. This one, the previous one, great fragrance. This one smells like wet dog. So don't bring in a bouquet of this. Real good selling point. I don't know if I'm shooting myself, but again, it's just a great plant in the woodland garden. What's nice is the fruits, they'll turn like a light red as they age. So just like, you think about your southern magnolia, those big aggregate fruits, this one will go red. It's just a great magnolia. I was excited to be able to get this, and we're going to add more onto the property here. This plant, again, like I said, I haven't met a Styrax or anything in that family. I haven't met. Believe it or not, we have at least 2 species more in the southeast. This is Styrax Americanus. They call it, this variety is variety pulverulentus, but basically you can call it the downy American snowbell. And yeah, it's a mouthful to try to say that. This plant I learned about when I worked for Tony Avent. He had it in the gardens, and the leaves, you can actually see, for those of you who are here, when you walk out, they're right in the front cold frame. The leaves are covered with these silver hairs. So the leaves look silvery blue almost. In spring, you can see it's absolutely covered in white fragrant flowers. I'm just thrilled. I had the plant that we had propagated from Tony Avent's. I had a propagule from that we planted out. Then, all of a sudden this one called Baby Blue showed up on the market. And for years I thought they were 2 different things. So a nurseryman went to Tony's, propagated off of it, thought it was such a great plant. He gave it the name Baby Blue. So we actually have 2 of them on the property. Those flowers are only about maybe an inch at most, but it's just absolutely covered with them. And like I said, the hairs on the leaves, especially the underside, are silver. It's just a fantastic native plant. I love it. And what's weird is it actually grows in floodplains, so it doesn't mind wet soils. We actually have one planted up by the boardwalk here. And then this is just, it's a cool plant with a cool story. So if you're familiar with Franklinia, that's a plant that has just this amazing history. It would not be on the planet if it wasn't for horticulture, because the Bartrams, when they were collecting, they camped on the Altamaha River, woke up in the morning, saw this plant. They're like, oh, this is great. They collected seed. They came back a few decades later. It was never seen. It's never been found in the wild ever since. So every Franklinia that's on the earth right now descends from that seed collection. Well, that's related to, Gordonia. I'm forgetting the common name on Gordonia, but it grows on the eastern part of the state. So if you drive down towards Wilmington, you'll see about this time of year white flowers in the trees. So Tom Rainey, who is one of the most amazing plant breeders, he's up in Fletcher, North Carolina. It's like, well, they're related. Let's try, there's history of this cross being attempted. Let's try it again. Well, Tom is just phenomenal. So he created this cross between our native Gordonia and what would have been our native Franklinia, but he got both attributes. So Franklinia is known for having just amazing red fall color. Both of them have these white flowers that they can be, I don't know if that's about 3 inches across. It's got hybrid vigor, because Franklinia can be a little bit finicky. This one it grows like a weed. It's semi-evergreen, and the foliage will actually get some of that bronzing in fall. And it just it starts blooming about a month ago and goes till frost. It's just a fantastic plant. And it's kind of like you're keeping the genes of Franklinia going. It's just in a little bit of a different vehicle, but it's just a fantastic fantastic late summer flowering tree. He's got more breeding that he's done. He's actually created one of these that he took this plant, double the chromosomes, so the flowers are even bigger. It behaves a little bit differently, but that one's called Sweet Tea. Maybe I'll try to get that one for next year. Jumping into shrubs. This is a plant that I will probably have every plant sale because it will never sell well in a garden center because it's like the ultimate teenager. You know, it's so gangly looking in a pot. In a 3-gallon pot, it's going to be 2 sticks and it's just not looking good. And it's one of those things that you've got to have faith in it, get it in the ground, let it get going. This plant, we had one in our old house. I stopped counting at 50 swallowtails on it. You know, our neighbor was like, "Oh, is that a butterfly bush?" I was like, "Well, you might as well call it one." It gets these wonderful white spikes of flowers. It gets great yellow fall color. It can go full sun to part shade. It's just a great plant, but it just does not look good in a pot. So it's one of those things that you just got to trust me. Ask Marcus Schaefer. I told him, I was like, it's going to be ugly looking in a pot. Get it in the ground. He's thanking me now. You had a question?
Space doesn't even matter.
So they will start to spread. They aren't, you know, they don't spread quickly. Now I've gone and seen some old plantings that, you know, that are 50 years old and they're massive. So it's something that if it starts spreading a little bit, take a shovel, just, you know, prune that out and go plant it somewhere else on the garden or share it with someone. But I would give it probably about 6 foot spread for one of these plants, of give it that room to grow. And then you can kind of decide. But again, it just looks bad in a pot, but great flowers, great native, great fall color. I wouldn't garden without this plant. Our beautyberry, this has always been such a great plant, gets good yellow fall color. This is the traditional form that pretty much everyone is used to with the purple berries. We've sold the white fruited form. I think we do have some of the white fruited form in the plant sale. We don't have the pink one this year. We'll probably have it next year. One of the things they found out was there was Indian folklore about them crushing leaves and you'd rub them on your, you know, arms and they're mosquito repellents. They actually tested it. That's true. So it's a Native American technique of, you know, dealing with mosquitoes, and it works. It's a fantastic plant in the garden. You know, multi-season interest. When they start getting a little big, what you can do is just treat it as a cut back shrub. Cut it back to about 6 to 8 inches. It'll resprout and be even thicker. Let's see. Now I'm shying away from some of the Asian beauty berries because the typical dichotoma, it can seed around. This one, it doesn't produce much fruit, much flowers or fruit. Now, normally you'd say, well, why would I want to grow it? That foliage is just unreal. You put it in a shady area in the garden and it lights up. So this is a beauty berry that you're really going to be growing more for foliage. You're not going to have to worry about it, you know, prolifically fruiting and being a pest. But I've seen a couple mature plants. It hasn't been in the country that long. They brought it back from Japan maybe about 10 years ago. So I've seen some mature specimens and they're stunning. Just great foliage interest. And they've given it the American name of wine spritzer because Shiji Murasaki apparently didn't do it. Now, I love clethra. This is a fantastic plant for fragrance, for good fall color, can tolerate moist to almost wet soils. It does spread by stolons, so it will start creeping out. This is a variety. This is when I do my talk on plant names, I'll kind of go like my big pet peeves that drive me crazy. Originally, it was introduced as Einstein. They didn't think that sold well, so then they changed the name to Summer Sparkler. But this one has really long flowers, and for some reason, it's kind of like after it got a certain length, it couldn't stay straight, so it got kind of twisted. So it kind of looks like a firework going off to me. And there's so many different varieties of this. So this is Summer Sparkler, just a white flowered one. We also have Ruby Spice, which is a pink flowered form. Again, these are both great native. If you've got a slope that you want to, start holding the slope back, this is a great shrub to use for that. You had a question? I would say probably about 3.5 feet. And again, you can hack these things back. They can take a lot of abuse. Hydrangea Paniculata. My whole thing is there's so many great ones out there. This one though, it has probably the biggest blooms I've seen on Hydrangea Paniculata. And what's funny is the breeder that gave us Limelight that, you know, everyone has to have. This was like a sister seedling out of that same batch that gave us Limelight. They decided not to patent this one. The flowers on this will, no lie, they'll be over a foot. I mean, they're massive. Now, this is a big growing plant. It can get up to 10 feet tall, but so, you know, it's definitely, if you have a small garden, this is probably not the plant for you. But if you've got space for it and want some massive blooms to be able to cut, it's fantastic to grow. So that's Phantom. And what's funny is they didn't patent this one. So it roots like a weed. Our oak leaf hydrangea, we don't have any cultivars. These are just seedlings. So they can range from, you know, your average size, probably about 5 feet, to some of the bigger ones can push up to about 10 feet tall. You know, they don't grow really quick, so don't expect it to shoot up to 10 feet. They of course get really good fall color. I've seen some I've got some great photos of fall color with oak leaf hydrangea. They can go from orange to red to purple. Great white flowers in the early summer. Even as they get age, the stems kind of exfoliate, so they get this kind of like you think about paper bark maple, that effect. But just a great native plant. A couple of different Alyssiums. Now, I used to always say this is one of the best plants for deer not touching. I think it still is, but you know, it's one of those things, the minute you say it, the deer will prove you wrong. One of my colleagues showed photos from his yard where they had stripped everything off of his. I was like, well, damn, that just came off the list. So this is one, and this is it's got an interesting backstory. It's native to Florida, but it's hardy to up to almost zone 6. Well, yeah, up into zone 6. And it's one of those things of going, why is something from Florida that cold hardy? The theory is when the ice sheets pushed everything south, it went down, but it never was able to get back up. So there's a lot of plants that are native down in Florida that have this latent cold hardiness. And this is just a great the typical species, which we also have in the plant sale, just green leaves. When you crush it, it smells like black licorice, which is one reason why typically anything that has that fragrance in foliage, the deer, that's the last thing they really want to go towards. Now, this was a really cool one that came. Tony Avent went down to Superior Trees down in Florida. They were growing this by the tens of thousands, seedlings. And he started walking the rows, and there's a yellow, leafed one. There's another yellow leafed one. He's asking, what do you do with it? Oh, we're going to throw them away. And he said, can I take a couple? So he brought, and I was still working at Plant Delights when he brought these back. And we planted like 3 or 5 different clones throughout the garden. This one ended up being the best one out of the bunch. And it really, this shot in the bottom right is February, right after we had that period where we had 8 straight days of below freezing temperatures. So it can handle the cold, no problem. Great leaf color. It definitely starts to brighten up in the cooler weather. It kind of fades to more of a chartreusey green during the summer. The stems will even get that reddish color. So it's a fantastic plant. The flowers you'll never pay attention to. They're so nondescript. It's the leaf color. And like I said, we also have the plain green one. It's just a great hedging evergreen. Yes. It will not evergreen, or this one, it's ever gold. But it's a fantastic plant. There's new ones. You know, this one is good enough. I don't know why we needed another one. I don't know how they're different. We tend to do that in this industry, unfortunately. This one, so the oldest ones right now at Tony's are standing about 8 feet tall. So they came in like 2005. So, and that you can hack these back, and it's again, one that responds well to pruning. So Tom Rainey, who I mentioned earlier with the Gordlinia, he also started playing around with breeding Illicium, because there's a species called Illicium mexicanum. They've now lumped it into Illicium floridanum. They're so different because the Mexican Illicium tends to reflower. So Tom took that reflowering habit, crossed it with Illicium floridanum, got these things that I mean, the flowers on these are probably 3 inches across. They look, I mean, they look exotic. Has that same fragrant foliage, but these things are flowering machines. We were visiting Martin Vandergiesen down in Mobile, Alabama, and his nursery manager pointed to Scorpio, which is the red one. He said, there's more flowers on that one plant than this entire crop of straight Illicium floridanum. So it's a great evergreen with these great flowers. It'll flower for a long season, can tolerate, you know, moist soils. It's wet and shady. We've seen it in sun to shade. So it's just a great evergreen for our area.
How tall?
So he's got Orion and Scorpio. Orion's the kind of, it's a really creamy white. I wouldn't say it's a pure white, but just great evergreen plants.
What's the height?
Itea. This is Virginia Sweetspire, another kind of like Clethra, same kind of growth habit where it'll keep sending runners out. This one actually has an interesting story. Someone from Pennsylvania collected seed down in Georgia, brought it up to Pennsylvania. They shared some plants. I think her name was Jacqueline Henry. She shared some plants with Swarthmore College. Then Durr went and visited Swarthmore College, saw this plant on the campus and was like, you've got something there. So they went and gave it a proper name. So they gave the Henry for Jacqueline Henry, and then Garnet was Swarthmore's colors. So that's this has been like it was the industry standard for a long time, because it's got some of the best fall color, got some of the best flowering. That fall color will go reds to purples. They do have a problem, this one not so much, with something called flea beetle that will kind of spot them a little bit. This one I wouldn't worry about it, but you get the flowering in the spring, you get this great, evergreen, tough natured habit, and then you get fantastic fall color. This is another one of our evergreen natives, Lakota. These can actually tolerate, they don't put them out in full sun. They want to be in some shady locations. The bit about them being fragrant, you've got to stick your face in there. It's not something that, oh, you have a bouquet of Lakota. So you get these white flowers. This just happens to be a variegated form of it that's been selected. And what's nice is the colors will change. So in spring, you'll get this flush that has, that red with pink in it. And then it'll pretty much go to, I messed up my typing. It'll go to green and white as it ages. But it's just a nice evergreen plant for shade. They will, same like the Lakota, same like the Itea and the Clethra, they do keep sending up runners. So it will gradually spread, which is, I think, a fantastic quality for some of those shady areas. I wouldn't put it in dry areas. It wants moist to more moist soils. That's where it's happiest. Mahonias, now before anyone throws a pitchfork at me, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mahonia bealii is what is in our woods. And the whole reason it is Mahonias are self-infertile. It needs another clone to produce viable seed. Mahonia bealii is a seed crop. They just sow seed because we all know it comes up like, I think the phrase like hair on a dog's back. So every different plant has a different clone, so it sets viable seed. Well, these, if you pick one and put it in your yard, it'll still form fruit, but the fruit's basically empty. It's parthenocarpic. So you'll get the grape looking fruit, which is why one reason it's called grape holly. You'll get fantastic flowering December, January. You get a warm day. Where I had these planted at High Point, the honeybees found it. It's one of those things, important things of having something flowering around a food source for our bees all the time. And this way you don't worry about it producing seed and being a pest. I absolutely love Mahonias. I hate bealii, hate that plant with a passion because it is a pest. But all these, hybrids that came out, you just pick one and go with it. So we've got, I think, 10 of each different variety. So Arthur Menzies, the flower spikes go straight up. I've seen old specimens, even the bark on them is stunning looking. I actually went to a Mahonia conference. I mean, that's how much of a geek I am. But the fragrance, some of them, they almost smell like lemon pledge. So nice fragrance, great winter flowering. I've seen people take, they've got big plants, they'll cut a stalk and put it in a vase and bring it inside. So as you can see, Arthur Menzies gets those upright flower spikes. Winter Sun is more congested. And then Charity, again, is more upright, and you can get the foliage texture. Some can be a bit more coarse, like, the horrible invasive one, but others, the leaflets are much smaller, so it's got a bit more finer texture, and all of them almost have a bluish green cast to them. So I still say, avoid the bad one. There are still some great ones out there. So don't run me out of town. I knew this would be, I had to put that caveat. One group of plants that I absolutely adore are deciduous azaleas. I make it my mission that we are going to popularize these things because for some reason they just aren't as popular as they need to be. That we've got some fantastic native species of these, and then people have been making selections over the years. This is one that I fell in love with back in 2001 when I did my internship up at the mountains. There was a plant up there. I pulled the sucker off of it, put it in my parents' yard. It's got great fragrance. The leaves almost have a bluish cast to it. It's a great plant. And this was found in the town of Marydale, which I always thought it was found like on the Maryland-Delaware border or something, but just as close. But it's a hybrid between two of our native species. It can go in some wetter soils. It's just a great selection. So we've got this one. We actually have probably about maybe at least 8 different types of deciduous azaleas. We've got some straight species. We've got this one, Mymary. This came out of a transplant nursery down south. They had a whole series of deciduous azaleas that did better in shade. For years, we had a deciduous azalea at my parents' house and it never flowered. It's like, what's the point? So we moved it into sun. Suddenly it started flowering. We were growing it in the wrong place. But this one can tolerate more shade than others, has great fragrance. It came from the Beasleys down at transplant, so it likes our heat and humidity. Like when we did this renovation in the garden, it does help knowing where your plants came from. There's a Northern Light series. They're not the happiest things down here. This one being bred in Georgia, it's happy here. Great plant for this one, summer, it's just a shrub. It's nondescript, just grows in the back, can tolerate wet soils. But the real thing is amazing fall and winter color. So when those stems, they are brilliant orange red with a little bit of yellow cast. It is a willow, so it will start to lose its color as it ages. You just hack it back and it'll resprout. But this is a fantastic plant for winter color. I always like citing it with something evergreen behind it. It just makes it pop a little bit more. You don't have to have snow, and I prefer not to. Now this is actually a blueberry that's native down in the Gulf Coast area and kind of sandy soils. But this thing, the color on it, it just is unmatched. It's this purpley blue kind of blush to it. It's evergreen. So it's just a unique color in the garden. It does have edible blueberries. Definitely do not want it in wet soils. It's not happy there. I mean, as long as it's well draining, moist soils would be fine. But just a fantastic evergreen with, this photo doesn't really capture the color. It is that chalky blue with those purple tones to it. And it even intensifies once winter hits, when you get those cooler temperatures. Viburnums, I love Viburnum nudum. This is a plant that gives you, in spring, you get white flowers, you get great foliage. It almost looks like it's been waxed. You get this wonderful, the trick is make sure you kind of like blueberries, you got to have multiple different ones to get better fruit set. but the fruit will come out white. It will then age to pink and then go to blue. So you get this great fruit set, and then the fall color is fantastic on these. You know, reds and oranges to it. So we've got winter fir in here, and then, you know, me wanting to bring something that you're really not going to find. This is the form of it with really much more narrow leaves, and it actually tends to be a more compact plant. I got cuttings off of a plant at Hopeland Gardens down in Aiken, South Carolina. It's the first time I ever saw it. You know, me being a geek, I'm like, I want cuttings. So, you know, we got it, brought it up to the Ralston. I went and got cuttings again, so we could have it here. We've got it now planted up at the boardwalk. So it's just a different textured form. So if you want to have two different ones, you know, the typical winter fir is going to get much bigger leaves. This one's going to stay a little more compact. So it kind of serves two different roles in landscape, but still will get the really good fall color to it. And then this is actually a plant that I found way back in the days working at the Ralston. We were driving down the eastern part of the state, and my buddy Todd knew that if my head whipped around, I saw something. And it usually, would say, he just would turn around. So where they have all those pine tree plantations and you've got the ditch with the water in it, we had to jump over one of those. I saw something gold caught my eye. And so this is off of our native arrowwood, not the invasive one that we've got out here. So this will get blue fruit, but it was a gold sport off of our native arrowwood. So we gave it the name Golden Arrow. It definitely does. It's kind of a catch-22 to get the really intense yellows. It likes to be out in the full sun, but then it'll tend to bleach a little bit in full sun. So you want to find a happy medium of give it a little bit of maybe afternoon shade. It won't be as intense, but it's a great native. So we just gave it some good foliage color to it. And I found it, so I like it. But it's a good, you know, native viburnum. Perennials, we've got a lot of different ones. We've got Agastache. This is a hybrid between two, blooms all summer long. Pollinators just keep going to it. You know, this is one of those things that there's some plants that, you know, like a butterfly weed, that it's for, you know, a specific need. Then there's generalists, and that's the majority of your insects that just want nectar. This is going to give that. It just is a great plant. It was a, you know, great plant pick in 2004. It's you know, it's an oldie but a goodie. Kind of purpley blue flowers. Amsonia, I still love Amsonia. This happens to be one that the reason they picked it is a bit more compact growing. Sometimes when we grow Amsonia hubrectii, the summer leaves, they get chlorotic and it looks a little off. So this one keeps really nice dark green color. It's got that fine foliage texture, but then the fall color on this one, you know, it's this brilliant gold. We had a friend that cut a whole bunch of stems and did like some of the dark purple dahlias as a you know, cut flower combination. But Amsonias they're bulletproof in the garden. Pale blue flowers in spring, but it's that, you know, it's fleeting. The nice thing is having this light, you know, fine texture in the garden. It's great when there's a light breeze because it'll move. I always love finding ways to get movement in the garden. Of course, I think, you know, I've told Hayden, I'm like, always have butterfly weed. Everyone always asks for it. So, you know, we'll always have some different, you know, the typical Asclepias tuberosa, which, you know, definitely when you plant it, make sure that's where you want it. It does not like being transplanted. We've had the yellow flowered one. We just have the straight species this time. Great plant if you're, you know, the monarchs love it. They need it. Now this is a plant that plant of the year. Usually if Perennial Plant Association names something a plant of the year, it's a good plant, it's durable. The flowers are super tiny, but when you've got a couple thousand of them on a plant, it shows up. Real nice fine texture. It'll flower the majority of the season. If it's, you know, like most plants, when you get into the like horrible part of the summer, it'll, you know, kind of shallow off a little bit. But again, you can always hack this back to get it to refresh and reflush. But this is just a fantastic filler plant to just, you know, the pollinators love it because there's tons of flowers for them to go to. It's just a great plant. This is a plant that when it first came on the scene, I was like, I've got to have that. It's a false sunflower, but basically without the yellow. It's got oranges and reds, and it just keeps flowering. The ones in the cold frame's been flowering for at least a month. The photo you see here, we were up in upstate New York in June. It was flowering then. So really long bloom period. These great oranges and reds. Even the leaves have that bronzy color and then dark black flower stems to it. So it's just a great, I don't know how you describe it. I mean, it looks like more like burning embers. But this is a fantastic plant. I'm happy to have this one in the plant sale. Yes. I've seen it, mature plants I've seen maybe at max about 3 feet. We've got this hibiscus again, the plant sale. This is actually, it's native down in Texas area, and it's threatened because it's a little bit promiscuous. So it keeps crossing with everything else. So the species is actually getting muddled. So to actually find, pure hibiscus daisicalix, it's hard to find. They're actually taking pure ones and moving and planting them where there's no other hibiscus to try to make sure that, there's straight populations. What I love is the foliage texture. Those leaves are so narrow. It's got this fine foliage texture. It actually is good because the Japanese beetles, it's kind of like it's too narrow, so they can't hold on to it.
Yeah.
Also, there's this theory that, when a plant has dissected foliage like that, insects look at it and go, oh, someone's already eaten it. So they'll just move on. But one thing you can see, the stems are kind of a pink color. I've even seen when first frost is hit and it drops all of its leaves, it's almost like, where we have a red twig dogwood, you've got these pink stems. It's something that I'd never paid attention to until a couple of years ago. I saw some and I was like, oh, I didn't consider it having that aspect. But it gets these white flowers. They're probably about 4 inches across. Just a really cool hibiscus. Speaking of cool hibiscus, this is one that came out when I first saw it in a catalog. I'm like, eh. Then I saw it in person. We have a whole clutch of them in the compound here. The variegation on this, so it's one of our perennial hibiscus. Now I'm horrible with colors of describing them. They call that magenta pink. I call it red. I mean, the flowers are good 7 inches across, bright red or magenta pink, but the variegation actually stands out. And even as we start to go into fall and get some of the cooler temperatures, those pinks are going to pop even more. So honestly, it's a hibiscus that wouldn't even need to flower for me, but when you throw, 7-inch, size flowers on it, it's even better. Perfectly hardy for us. Came out of the Walters Gardens breeding program. They've been doing all these amazing hibiscus that have been coming out. But I was really happy to get this one for our plant sale. This is another group that I love, Blazing Sars. There's so many of them. I'm trying to learn them, but this is one really much, you talk about spicata can get really big. You go up into, Doughton Park up on the Blue Ridge, there's a huge population of Liatris up there. This is a much more small statured one, more fine texture to it. It's kind of like one plant just has more blooms. It's kind of like when the blooms go smaller, they just grow in multitude. Tons of flower spikes on it. Probably will stand maybe about 2 feet tall. Pollinators go crazy on it. There's a white flowered form, so we're going to start saving seed on that. But this is a plant that I've always loved and always had in the garden. Some of the different phlox that have come out, tall phlox, usually the problem is they get covered in powdery mildew. All these no one introduces one that has mildew issues anymore. There's no point. This is one, it will start to spread, not aggressively like some of them. Really good clean foliage. It blooms earlier than most of them. So this is where, having a couple different, varieties of phlox can extend your season. After it gets done flowering, just cut it back and it'll reflush and you get more of like a fall season bloom to it. So that's fashionably early crystal. And the whole reason I paid attention to this, Adrian, my wife, has it over at the Senior Botanical Garden. She kept commenting about this series. So like, okay, we'll try it. I think we're going to be including this when we redo the pink and white garden this fall. This other phlox, I would not garden without it. It's our native woodland phlox. What's great is this can be an evergreen ground cover. When it's not flowering, it's only about 6 inches tall. It'll gradually form a mat. And then in spring, it'll shoot up to, flower spikes to about 12 inches. They're fragrant. If your soils, if you are always doing mulch and getting those great, soils that will receive seed, it'll seed around. And Tony Avent had this in the woodland garden years ago, and there were so many different seedlings, and we started selecting ones. The two that we're offering are May Breeze, which is the white, and then Blue Moon, which is kind of that purpley blue. Just a great plant. And it, like I said, if you put it out in sun, which is kind of, when something's called woodland phlox, it doesn't occur to me to put it in full sun, but it tends to be a bit more denser mat and tighter structure to it. So it'll tolerate going out in sun. Mountain mints. This is a group, usually when I hear the word mint, I run the other way. But if you've got space and want pollinators, there is not a plant that'll give you a bigger bang for your buck. Again, seeing this up on the Blue Ridge Parkway, typically it's that mountain mint muticum. Those bracts, those silvery bracts just stand out. And literally they are just covered with, native wasps. I mean, don't think, wasps are bad. I mean, I think we all got trained as kids to run, but so many different pollinators are on these things. Pilosum is another one. Tenuifolium is one that we're seeing blooming right now. We've got it on our property native. It's got a real, fine texture foliage. We're hoping to get, now they're mints. They will spread. Now we do have one that we're trying to build up numbers called Stowaway. It was found down at Daniel Stowe Garden. It's a clumping form of muticum. So it's, and we've got it planted so I can watch to make sure that that's true. I don't want to say it doesn't run and then someone comes after me in 5 years. But these things, if you're really focused on pollinators, you can't garden without pycnanthemums. Again, this is another plant. Grab the foliage, crush it in your hand, put it on your arms. Mosquitoes will leave you alone. Now, you look at this picture and it's like, it's a black-eyed Susan. But if you've grown the old form of black-eyed Susan, gold sturm, or I can't remember how it translates, it'll get this leaf spot on it that gradually weakens the plant more and more, and the plant will basically fade away. This is one that's been bred. It was just named Perennial Plant of the Year by the Perennial Plant Association. American Selections, which, we've got that AAS bed. When they name a perennial an AAS selection, because they're typically focused on annuals, it means something. This is that it's resistant to that leaf spot, so it's very vigorous. It's covered with these little hairs that keeps the fungus off. So it's a black-eyed Susan that's going to persist for a long time. This, when we redo some of the gardens, we've got some of these masses of black-eyed Susans. We're going to be switching to this variety. This is a goldenrod that I remember we were up on the Blue Ridge and we were driving in shady areas, and I'm like, what? We stopped the car and got out, and I pulled out. I do travel with, Flora of the Carolinas. We keyed it out. This is a goldenrod that'll flower in dry shade, which is usually one of our most challenging places to try to garden. So it'll bloom. Ours are just getting ready. I mean, they might be in full bloom at the plant sale, but this will do fantastic in dry shade. It does get these kind of wands. So, it is more of like a gold, some of the goldenrods, it's more like a cluster. This is a kind of a wand effect. I was really glad to get this one in the plant sale because there's more to life than just fireworks. That's the one that everyone's growing. This is one I'm looking for. I have seen this offered time and time again. So it's like, okay, it's been a perennial plant of the year. It's always a good list to go to of what do we want to sell this year. I've wanted to grow this, so I'm getting one this year to see how it does. I mean, people have said that it's done great. This will be a little test this year. but long bloom season, great color, foliage texture is good. So we'll see how this, and then, it's related to lamb's ear, except this one isn't covered in silvery hairs. And, I've never been a big fan of lamb's ear because when it gets wet, it looks bad. But I'm looking forward to growing this one. This is a plant we had it, I don't know if we had it in the spring plant sale, but maybe because they just changed the name on it. It used to be Machia, which again, that's a name that usually people run the other way. Fairly well behaved. You can see the bottom picture is early spring when it started, growing. It's an evergreen mat, almost flat to the ground. Then when it starts growing, you get this fine texture with this kind of burgundy cast to it. And then it flowers for an extremely long period of time. I first saw this in a colleague's garden up in DC, and then I saw it at the US Botanic Garden, and it's just now really starting to become popular. But the name change may help, that you're not going to see Lysmachia and immediately move on. I think some of us have probably been scarred by loosestrife before. This is a plant that I've gardened with for years. We've started incorporating it into the garden. It's an Evergreen Veronica. In winter, the leaves will go from green to almost a purple color, stays only like 2 or 3 inches tall. It's mat forming, but then when spring hits, it's covered in cobalt blue flowers. I love this, I tried to replicate this here, but someone sent me the wrong bulbs. This daffodil is called Huera, and they bloom right at the same time. And you just plant the daffodil in and amongst, the Veronica, so it'll pop up through it. It's just, if you're looking for a ground cover, it's a fantastic option to look at. And that is the Republic of Georgia, not, Bulldog State. This is something that it's kind of a shrub, kind of a perennial. It'll sucker. You can see when you walk the trails, when you go by the wildflower garden, it's filled some patches. It is more of a spreading ground cover. It drops its leaves in fall. That's one reason, you call it yellow. It gets this great yellow fall color. If you rip it up, the roots are brilliant yellow. It's related to barberry, related to Mahonia. So if you've ever dug those up or scratched the bark, you'll see that yellow color. But it's just a great woodland perennial. Okay, a few grasses. We do, of course, everyone loves Uhlenbergia capillaris. This is you want to plant it at least a month before your last frost or before your first frost. You plant it any later than that, you're running the risk of it won't make it through the winter. So we're good timing wise now. Everyone loves it. When you cut it back in spring, don't cut it back too short, because then you'll go right into the crown and it messes everything up. So go about 3 to 4 inches in height. It's just, I don't think, our highways would be as beautiful as they are without some of these masses they've done. So there's this one, which, it'll get 4 feet tall. And even if you leave it up through the winter, the dew will hit it and it still looks beautiful. It's just brown. This is a different species. I first got introduced to this going out to Denver. This is a cold hardy form, basically, of Uhlenbergia. It grows in river seeps, so it likes kind of wetter soils, which typical Uhlenbergia does not. You put, our typical one in wet soils, it'll die out. This can tolerate wetter soils. It's a bit shorter. It only gets about 2 feet tall in height. It kind of looks like lovegrass, one of our native, this is native too, but it looks like lovegrass with that pinkish bloom to it. But this is one that's just recently started getting on the scene a bit more and more, but it'll go zone 5. So for northerners who have been jealous of our Uhlenbergia, they can now grow one. A little penicidum. This is kind of like in between. Little Bunny is really short. Hamlin's a bit tall. This is kind of, the Goldilocks story of it's right in between. We'll get about 1.5 feet tall with the flowers. Just a good fountain grass. We've got that in the plant sale. Two native vines. Our native jessamine. Now, little fun fact: If it's not a true jasmine, which is jasminum, it's not pronounced jasmine. It's jessamine. My Louisiana instructor in plant ID drove that home on us. This is a form that's more cold hardy. The flowers are a little bit bigger and it is fragrant. So it's a fantastic evergreen native vine for us. And likewise, another great evergreen native vine, our native honeysuckle, the coral honeysuckle. This is the one that everyone is pretty much dropping the other varieties, the other red blooming ones, because this one is pretty much nonstop flowering. It's, you know, it'll do the big super bloom in spring, but then it'll continue to send out flowers throughout the season. You can kind of shear it back to encourage it to flower even more. Of course, hummingbirds go nuts over these things. I had this planted on a big arbor at High Point, and it just is a stunning plant. Also nice, this one does not get the powdery mildew that the species will tend to get. So Major Wheeler is a great native honeysuckle. One bulb, everyone loves the spider lilies that are in bloom right now. We've got a bunch of these for sale for the plant sale. When we did that crosswalk from Grayland, there were a couple clumps that were in the way of that crawl. I was like, we're going to make use of these. And these, the only thing that I'll, you know, they're called, I love the different names, spider flower. Sometimes they're called hurricane lilies down in the Gulf because that's, you know, they flower during hurricane season. Naked ladies because they flower without their leaves. The trick is, do not plant these deep. There's an old wives' tale that says when you plant them, it's going to take 7 years to reflower. That's because people would plant them too deep. And what they would do is they make new bulbs above them. So it takes that long for them to make a new bulb higher that would get enough age to flower. So when you plant these, plant them with just the neck of the bulb, just at the soil level. You do not plant these too deep. And I guarantee you plant one, give it a couple years, dig it up, you've got 20. They're notorious for you dig one clump and there's, you know, because of the deeper ones, there's tons more bulbs on the bottom layer. So, I mean, this is something we always wanted to offer. They can go in full sun into shade as well. So wrapping things up, just a couple reminders. We're going to take pre-orders up until the Wednesday before the plant sale at 8 p.m. because I need a couple days to, you know, tally, you know, basically your order comes in, give me a day to try to get totaled because we do about 100 plant pre-orders with each plant sale. And because I don't want too many people doing them at once, I just do them. So I'll be in spreadsheet hell for a little while, but it's all worth it to get you guys your plants. So we do cut it off Wednesday night at 8 p.m. That'll give us enough lead time to be able to pull the orders. We do ask that you pay for your pre-sale, but then you will be able to shop the day that you pick it up, whether it's Friday or whether it's Saturday. We will, you know, we'll send you a confirmation on your pre-orders, letting you know, hopefully everything's still stocked. We do sell out of some things during the pre-sale. You can pick them up 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Friday. Like I said, you'll be, even on Friday, you can still shop then. We've got, you know, the ability to take cash, credit, or a check. If you aren't a friend, we of course encourage you to become one. It does, you know, it's a big funding source for us to make us be able to do all these improvements to the gardens to, you know, have, you know, everything that we've been working on. You can still become a friend and get a pre-order as long as you do it by Sunday. And like I said, the email will go out probably in the next half an hour to an hour, just enough time to get home. No racing. No, I'm not paying anyone speeding tickets, but just look in your email box, look for something from Renolda Gardens or something with pre-order in the subject line. If you don't immediately see it, check your spam. If you still don't see it, just email us and we'll figure out what, you know, there's always a glitch. There always is. We try to limit it as much as possible. So just either email me, John, no H, @renolda.org, or sarah@renolda.org, and we'll get it solved quickly. So Sarah got my H, yes. We actually had two Sarahs in that office at one point, one with an H, one without an H. So that's a little bit of a taste of, I think we have over 150 different types of plants in the plant sale. So there's going to be even more out there. We're excited about this. It is, our plant sales have really ramped up, and they are a significant contribution to our operating. So it's, you get to help a great place and you get plants. So it's kind of like growing tomatoes.
Yeah.
But you get better results with this. Thank y'all. If you are interested, thank you. Next week, leaf casting class, we still have spots available. Wreath workshop, we've sold out one of them. One is 5 spots away from being sold out. Another one is half. So go on the website and look if you want to sign up for those workshops. But thank y'all.
Okay, so I wanted to keep a little quick forever. However, I'm running out of yarn.
You're running out of yard?
Running out of yarn.
That's when you get the old plants out and put new ones in.
Most of my trees are still shorter than me. I have, the only place that it could possibly go is I have 2 French trees that are like